Welcome to the High Volume Hiring Podcast. I'm Stephen Rothberg, the founder of job search site College Recruiter. We believe that every student and recent grad deserves a great career. This podcast features news, tips, case studies, and interviews with the world's leading experts about the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to high volume hiring. Thanks for joining us. Today's guest is Bill Boorman, a recovering recruiter with 40 years of experience in the industry who is now a strategic consultant to a number of talent acquisition technology companies and the founder of the True Unconferences. Bill, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Stephen. Good to be here.
Yeah, good to see you again. So, question for you. One of the things that I love about watching your travels, your journeys, et cetera, is that you've had the opportunity to travel the world, meet with employers all over the place, look at technology solutions in different areas of the world. What are some of the key similarities and differences between how employers hire at scale in different parts of the world?
Well, I think the main difference is usually in attraction, because the way in which we hire is essentially the same. The cornerstones are the same. We have a good understanding of a job requirement and exactly what that needs. And usually when you're talking about volume, it's less around the specific skill base and more around kind of the history and things like reliability and fit and so on. But generally speaking, hiring is very similar globally. We have different problems. They just manifest in a different way locally. So the big issue at the moment is attraction, and the way in which you might attract in San Francisco might need to be quite different to the way in which you might do that in New Zealand or in Lagos, Nigeria, for example. So it's very local, but essentially you still boil it down to the same things, which is how do you reach your targets, your target audience in a timely manner? And that's done in all kinds of different ways. I've seen all kinds of different things, from billboards to, it's still in some parts of the world, newspaper ads to job board at very specific, sophisticated people targeting and sourcing. Essentially, it's the same thing, which is how do we reach enough of the people we need and entice enough of them to actually put their hand up and say, yeah, I'm interested. Sometimes they do that digitally. Sometimes they do that on the phone. Sometimes they turn up somewhere and get in a queue, for some of the stuff the stuff that I've run. But essentially, it's the same thing. So I don't think it's a lot different. It's just a lot local. When you go local, even if you go across the states and you go from state to state, you can find that what works in that market is very local. So it's this kind of overriding understanding of good recruitment and good hiring and what works, good messaging, and then really being able to dig in locally and say, right, okay, what works here, and understand that what works in this city may not work in another city.
So a big employer like an Amazon that's going to have warehouses all over the world, in Leeds, they're going to recruit very differently than in Phoenix, Arizona.
Absolutely. They might run a job fair. It might be enough to have a job fair on a day, put it up and say, yeah, we're hiring, everybody turn up. There's all kinds of data behind that we start to look at, like the demographics, the level of unemployment, the age of the workforce, what's going to appeal to them in that particular area. The way in which you reach them is going to be very different. I'm quite an old man like you, Stephen, so I can remember these times. In the old,
we're not old. Yeah. We're 29.
Still. Yeah, before the internet, we used to choose local radio stations. And you'd make, your cable radio, you'd make a decision to say, if I want to reach a volume of people in this area, I'm going to turn up at this place and hire on this day. And the way to do that is to go on the local radio. And you might make a decision, say, actually, it's a national campaign. We've got enough places, so we're going to go on a national radio, whatever it is, and try and deal with that. But it's exactly the same. Even now, if you were going from Leeds, you'd say, right, how do we reach the people? Is it, some Some regional places still have local newspapers that people read on the bus when they go home, and you kind of
This word that you keep using, newspaper, it rings a bell.
not so many years ago, probably 5, 6 years ago, people used to read the local newspaper on the train or the bus commuting to work.
Right.
So that's where your audience was, and I've used data to hire some really sophisticated developers in Dublin, where we targeted bus stops outside particular Starbucks that we knew that they went to, but advertising on the bus stop. And it's the same principle all the time. It's where's your audience? How do you reach them? What message will resonate with them? What will make them apply in whichever way they apply, whether that's hitting a button, sending you a resume, turning up to an open day, whatever it is, what's going to make people turn up in enough volume and be the right type of people, the right kind of quality to get to the number of hires that you need in the best time.
Yeah, I love the idea of the bus stop ads and billboards, like right outside your competitor's place of employment.
Yeah.
Especially if they're going through some hard times or their CEO's been involved in some scandal or something like that.
I
You
have
throw up
been
a
involved.
billboard
I
and
will tell you just a small side story, but I have been
yeah.
involved in. There was a, a it wasn't my idea originally. It was Atlassian from Australia, but I stole
Hmm.
the idea later for a different campaign somewhere else. And they actually had a billboard on the back of a lorry, on the back of a truck, which they drove outside employers. And it was Atlassian, and they had pictures of Australia, and they were driving it to where developers were in undesirable towns. And the billboard literally said, "We're coming to steal your developers."
Wow.
And it was massively successful. And I've repeated that a few times. I've also repeated it with street artists in Berlin, where I got them to go and actually draw the street outside of an employer where we knew there was a lot of layoffs from some large tech startups. So same principle. Where's the people? How do you get their attention?
Yeah, and the layoffs is definitely something that I don't hear that much about that anymore. Maybe there just aren't the mass layoffs anymore, but you definitely used to hear about, a manufacturing facility was shutting down and another manufacturing facility or warehouse or whatever would start distributing flyers on cars in the parking lots and ads inside the buses and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. At the moment, Labour's so short that we'll go anywhere that we
Yeah.
think will work. You want truck drivers, advertise at the truck stop. There's just a normal logic that follows.
Yeah, as efficient and effective as job boards can be, it's only one sourcing tool. There's so many more out there, and so many of them work so much better in different industries, different occupational fields.
Yeah, although I think job boards are massively, we've heard every year about the demise of job boards. We've mourned them every year, and they come back in different forms, stronger and more revenue and greater attribution for source of hire. And I think you always need that central place, that easy way, So I do quite a lot with schools and colleges, and there's a reality that when I say to them, "How do you look for a job?" they kind of go, "I look on Indeed and then I look for a job."
Right.
It's like a program. This is where the jobs are. Now, there's loads of things they'll come to me and tell me about how terrible the experience is, why it's not a lot of fun doing that. But there's a reality that if this is where the jobs are, that's where people go. And I've seen job seeker behavior being very different digitally in the last 4 or 5 years that I've talked about a lot, which is that generally what we're getting is high volumes of people applying without actually doing the whole thing about employer brand for attraction and stuff is a little bit of a myth, in my opinion. People, depending what level they're at, they apply for every job based on certain criteria. The four criteria seems to consistently be salary as the number one, not necessarily as in how much money I want. Sometimes the money you're paid is an indicator of whether you should bother applying. It's too high or too low. Salary, location, even now, is important. Hybrid working is really hybrid. We see very little genuinely remote. People, you still want people within a commutable distance. That commutable distance has just gone a bit further because you don't have to rock up every day in the office. But it's still got a geographical, well, we'd like them to live this kind of rough area because they are going to have to be here some of the time. So location, the job title is important to people primarily on the indicator of is it worth the pain of applying. We built Game of Thrones recruiting, so the person who gets the job is the one alive at the end of the process, not the best qualified, especially hiring. So I think people looking at a job ad, and that can be on College Recruiter or anywhere, feel the process is going to be painful, so they're not going to invest a lot of effort. They're thinking they're almost definitely going to hear back, and they're probably right. They probably aren't going to hear back. It's only like 1 or 2% of people who apply who actually do hear back. So they don't invest a lot of time in deciding where to go, right? So job boards are the perfect destination for saying, go and have a look. You'll probably find 7, 8, 9, 10 employers looking for something similar. Apply for those 10. They actually become really engaged and look at the employer brand content once they get some kind of positive reaction. So once you apply for something as a recruiter, you might not even go to the career. You probably won't go to the career site. You probably won't go to Glassdoor. You probably won't research the employer in the way that brand heads would try and have us believe and spend our money. You need a trigger, and that trigger is usually a job ad or something that interrupts you. It's well targeted. It's on the money. It ticks your boxes. You apply. You don't expect to hear again. When you come back and say, well, okay, will you do a video interview or will you come in or this is the day, then you're all over the employer brand content. And that's when they go and study employer brand in the funnel. So I think that's what the volume hiring is can we reach enough people with enough triggers to say, put their hand up and say, okay, consider me. I'm not expecting back from you again, but consider me. And if you come back and say, yeah, and in reality at high volume, usually it's about speed. It's about who gets it, because usually when we're talking about high volume markets, there's people who have a dependency to work. They don't have the, the middle class bit of saying, I have some time to consider what my next career move is. It's, I need to be working. So whoever reaches them and makes that process as simple as possible and as less painful as possible and treats them in the right way in that process is the person who's probably going to not have problems hiring. And the people who like that, they're going to have an issue.
And when you say speed, Bill, just to make sure we're on the same page, you're not just talking about how many minutes does it take to complete the application, but you're also talking about, okay, you completed the application on Monday, Monday the 1st. Do you hear back on Tuesday the 2nd, or do you hear back 3 weeks later? I mean, I keep hearing from employers that are hiring a whole ton of hourly people, and they're upset that they're getting ghosted. It's like, well, how many days after the person applied?
We ghost 98% of our applicants. We deserve to be ghosted back. We shouldn't be upset.
Right. Yeah. The shoe's now on the other foot, right? But if you ignore an hourly applicant, perhaps a high volume for 2 weeks, and then get back to them and you wonder why they don't respond to you, it's because they've been working someplace for the last 10 days.
Yeah, they're out of work. So, speed of getting into, if you can get into the process, some of the stuff I've worked on with nurses and in healthcare, we built workflows which have had things like chatbots and basic assessment. So from when you see the ad, you have your first interview. And when you have your first interview, if you're successful, you get your first shift. And that can be done in 24 hours, right? That's done literally in subject to whatever industry it is and whatever regulatory checks we have to do. We're getting people to shift within 24 hours. So you see it, you're interested, you apply, you come along, you do your assessment, you come in for the interview. The interview is very specific around you because of what we're looking for. And if you tick the box for that, you have shifts. And that's the speed at which you're in this marketplace. And I'd argue any marketplace. That's the speed and frictionless way in which we need to get people to work. I've heard a lot about, and there's lots of data that says it's successful, where people are getting hired without interview.
The world's best-known investor and Wall Street expert Warren Buffett once said, "Wall Street is the only place that people ride to in a Rolls-Royce to get advice from those who take the subway." Mr. Buffett's quote is remarkably accurate, but how many people would rather receive advice from him than someone simply guessing? Welcome to Buy, Hold, Sell, your single source for Wall Street knowledge and profitable guidance. Please join me, Todd Schoenberger, and fellow trader Tobin Smith, as well as host Veronica Dudo, for a podcast known to move the needle for investors. Tobin and I are seasoned Wall Street executives with deep investment experience, and we are prepared to share our advice to those who choose to listen. Download Buy, Hold, Sell today on the Evergreen Podcast Network or your favorite podcast channel.
Hiring somebody without an interview is I think, mind-boggling to many. I question how much value that actually adds, or whether we just interview people because we interview people. It's like we always have, so we always do. But I can see it in some roles, especially like an executive role. But man, I mean, if you're hiring cooks or people in a warehouse, people in a retail store, and they have a demonstrated history of successfully doing that kind of job, do you really need to schedule them and for one interview, let alone six? A friend of one of like your kids are adult age, so are mine. A friend of one of my kids was being hired for like a server or hostess position in a restaurant. And it's like, coming to meet with the manager. Great. They were expecting to meet with the manager, get an offer, start the next day. No, we'll get back to you. So 3 days later, now I want you to meet with this person. Now I want you to meet with that person. And it's just like, you know what? I don't have time for this nonsense. I've got 3 other offers here. Why should I be trying so hard with you? You mentioned a few minutes ago the employer branding, and I read that you had been involved in a study involving 9 million job applications. So it's not like some skewed little sampling from one employer that hires 200 people a year. Some of the numbers in it were very consistent with what we see at College Recruiter, about 10% past the initial screening stage. So basically, they're probably qualified. I think it was roughly 1 in 200 ended up getting hired, which is pretty typical. Also, we see those numbers. It really depends on the role, really depends on the geographic area. That's not that unusual. Sometimes in some roles, we're seeing 5, 6, 7, 8%, but half of 1% isn't way out of the norm either. And what I was interested in that, I think you were kind of alluding to this a few minutes ago, is that what you found is that despite a massive investment by so many employers in building their brand and building their websites and building all this video and trying to communicate that they're the best employer in the world, that candidates don't really give a rip at the initial phase. They don't pay attention to it. It's like, is it the right job title? Does it pay me the right amount? Is it located in the right place? If so, I'm going to
The data
apply.
shows us that.
If you get back to me and if you're interested in me, now I'll invest some time and find out what it is that you do. Why should I work with you? Is that?
Yeah, and I don't think that's dissimilar to anything. If we consider candidates as selling themselves to some extent, you consider in the sales side of your business, you'll get your incoming leads of people going, we're interested, and you'll kind of filter them out between who's a tire kicker, who's just giving us a call, and you'll invest more time you'll qualify them a bit more every time you have an interaction, and you'll invest more time in that prospect, the more likely it becomes, okay, it's worth investing more time, right? And I think that's exactly what candidates are doing. So their first thing is they're really saying, I'm going to apply for this job. I'm probably not going to hear from you again. And the reality says they are actually correct, right? The numbers say you are correct.
It's absolutely rational what they're doing.
Yeah. So why would I spend time investing in that? Now, what we discovered is, in terms of all kinds of things like career sites, employer brand, is the more positive affirmations they got through that process of them saying, okay, can you do a test? Can you come in? Can you meet with someone? Can you do this job? The more people would then go into that the more people thought about, well, actually, maybe I am going to end up working here. I do need to go and find out about whether I like the culture or not. I do need to go and have a look at if this is going to be the job. Now I want to watch the day in a life video. Now it has some relevance because that might be the job I'm doing. I do want to go to LinkedIn and look up who my colleagues might be and see where they sit, right? So what I've developed with organizations that I work with is almost a reverse funnel. So you don't need a lot of information for attraction, which is where most people spend the money. You need triggers. You need to be able to reach the right people, very targeted, that says, here's some information. Because it's also always about, when are people hire ready? Right? That was some interesting work that I did with Adam Gordon on the product that was sold to iSIMS, Candidate ID, and everything we were building there was all about, there's 1 million people in your database, but actually only 1,000 of them are looking for a job at any one time. And all you're really interested in is, who are these 1,000? Because in the foot race, it's when are you going through that phase every 2 years, 3 years, when you might be looking for something, right? So it's exactly that, in that we've got to hear people, trigger the application at the right time when they're ready, when both sides come together. We're hiring, you're looking. Those two events are happening together. Now you're going to consider my opportunity, or you're considering moving, whatever it is, whatever level you're at. If I get you at the right time in that process, then as you go through that process, from the moment you've applied to, I can start honing in the content and the information I want to offer you based on what it is you're applying for. So I can make it very job specific. I call it job brand over employer brand. And we have a funnel which says we give you more content, access to more resources after you've applied, rather than when we're trying to attract you. And most organizations put most of their investment, most of their content, most of their stuff in the apply, and then once you've applied, the money for more stuff has actually run out. Well, actually, that's when you need the nurture. Once you're in that, actually, I might go and work there, or I might go for an interview there. So now I want to find out a bit more. I want to look around a bit more, see if I'm wasting my time with it. No, I'm not. That's really interesting. I'm also believe there's a bit in the candidate piece where they're not prepared to emotionally invest in that, while they're expecting to be disappointed. They don't want to. If we think of it like a relationship, any relationship really, they don't want to invest too much in that relationship, get too excited about the opportunity until someone else starts going, yeah, you're kind of interesting. We at least want you to do a test. We at least want you to do a video. We want you to come in and meet with us. We've now only got 5 people meeting with us, So I think the emotional investment bit, as much as the time is, I'm not going to waste my time and go through loads. And the one certainty, I got consistently from these candidates is they said, when I pushed apply, I knew it was going to be hard. I knew whatever I was going to be asked to do was going to be inconvenient or hard or time consuming and sometimes feel pointless.
Yes.
So I need to get more and more committed into that, because I think where we end up, where people are applying for multiple jobs, this is what came out of that research. They were applying for about 4 times as many jobs as they had done historically, just to feel like they got the opportunity. I think it's still the same case now. There's just less people in the market. Once they hit that, they'll start selecting out employers. If 5 people come back and say, yeah, I'm interested, you go, well, really, I want to cut that down to 3 because I've only got time to go and see 3. Or the first one that asked me to, when we're talking about the minimum wage, low skills market, first one that says, yeah, come in and see me, and I go and see them. And let's have a real horror story. If they say to me, can you start tomorrow? That's my job search done.
Right. Right. And then you're off the market.
I'm off the market, and then I'll decide whether I like it or not. Once I've been there a little while, I'll decide whether I like it or not. I'm not going to believe recruiters telling me it's a great place to work, right? Because it's kind of like, it's like real estate agents going, yeah, the crime might be quite high, but the security's okay. It's kind of that kind of thing. That's what people feel about recruiters, that we're always going to be positively spinning the opportunity. So it's like, no, I just want to go and meet the people who do the job. I want to go and speak to them. I want access to their stuff as quickly as possible. And then I'll start my first shift. And while I'm having my first shift, I'll go in the smoke room or the coffee room and I'll have a chat and go, what's it really like here? Is it cool here? Is it okay? And then I'll start deciding that. And that's why, the content and the employer brand, the intention needs to go all the way through the hiring process, but equally all the way through the onboarding process of saying, right, we're just going to give you more stuff that tells you you've made the right choice. And that's what I believe we need to build that funnel reversed out. We just need a little bit of information on the attraction bit and then let them push the button.
Yeah, no, super fascinating. And I think this will be a lot of help to a lot of employers who have understood that their employer brand is important, but they probably are putting it. It's important. It's just, but we've been, the conventional wisdom that I think you're helping to dispel is that it comes at the beginning of the process, and it comes further into the process than I think most would realize. So
yeah, you also want it very specific on job, right? You want it very I don't want employer brand. I want job brand. I want to know about. I don't necessarily want to know too much about College Recruiter, but I do want to know about this job in College Recruiter. Who are these people? Who's this team? If I get this on my resume, how is this going to help me get another job somewhere else?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
In 2 years or 3 years, right? That's what I want to see.
Yeah, even in a small organization like ours, the tech team has a different culture than the operations team, which has a different culture than the sales. We're working with different people. The type of work you're doing is different, and like you say, where does it get me 2 years from now, 5 years from now? That's going to be
even if they stay with you for 10 years. Like that's how they're selecting you. But ultimately, if you offer them enough opportunities, you've got your internal mobility right. You all get on well. They may stay. They may stay, but especially when you're looking in tech, people are looking on jobs as, what's the problem you need me to fix? What do you need me to come and do that's going to be interesting? It's going to educate me. It's going to make me look more employable. And actually, when I've done it in 18 months, I'm going to be looking around again and going, well, where do I go and fix something else?
Right. And maybe that's internal. There's another problem that you have for them. If so, awesome. But yeah, people don't want to hop from employer to employer. If they can stay at the same employer and keep doing interesting work and getting paid well, why wouldn't they? So for people who want to learn more or contact you, how should they do so?
LinkedIn, Facebook. Facebook's the primary one, but LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, I'm at Bill Boorman. I'm very easy to find online, or just Google me and reach me. My emails are online.
You have big footprints online.
Or just shout somewhere in a public place. Shout on Facebook and say, does anyone know how to get hold of Bill Boorman? And they'll find me.
Yes.
I'm very, very easy to find. Very easy to find. But anywhere social.
Well, cool. Thank you so much for joining us today on the High Volume Hiring Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Rothberg of job search site College Recruiter. Each year, we help more than 7 million candidates find great new jobs. Our customers are primarily Fortune 1000 companies, government agencies, and other employers who hire at scale and advertise their jobs with us. You can reach me at stephen@collegerecruiter.com. Cheers.
Hi there, I'm Heather Drago.
And I'm Sarah Saunders.
We host the podcast, That's a Hard No, about saying no and setting boundaries.
So you can become that true and empowered you that this world needs. Saying no isn't just okay.
It's the key to living an authentic, fulfilling life.
I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor. So while this podcast is in no way a replacement for one-on-one therapy, I suppose I know what I'm talking about.
I'd say so. We talk about learning to say no and set healthy boundaries and how it impacts mental health, physical health, relationships, parenthood, and more.
Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and visit our website, hardnopodcast.com.
We're here to help you find your no and say it unapologetically.
That's a hard no.